The crystal champagne flute shattered against marble flooring, sending glittering fragments skittering across the ballroom like broken promises. Every adult conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every child froze, clutching their party favors. And in the sudden, crushing silence, a 5-year-old girl named Maya stood perfectly still, her small brown hands trembling at her sides, her worn shoes surrounded by expensive shards that caught the chandelier light like accusations. She hadn't dropped the glass. She hadn't even been holding one, but every eye in that mansion turned toward her anyway, because that's what happened when you were the help's daughter at a birthday party where the gift bags cost more than your mother's monthly salary. Thomas Wright felt something cold settle in his chest as he watched from the entrance of the grand ballroom, still holding his coat, having just arrived from the airport. He'd flown back early from Singapore specifically for his son's 8th birthday party. What he witnessed in that frozen moment would change the trajectory of several lives, though no one in that room could have predicted it. Maya's mother, Grace, rushed forward from the kitchen doorway, her uniform still pristine despite having worked since dawn preparing catering trays. The terror in her eyes was visceral, the kind of fear that comes from knowing your entire livelihood hangs on the whims of people who could destroy you with a phone call. Her hands reached for her daughter, but before she could pull Maya away, a voice cut through the silence like a blade wrapped in velvet. "That's what happens when you bring trash into a palace," said Charlotte Pemberton, age 7, daughter of Manhattan's most prominent hedge fund manager. She stood on the decorative staircase in a designer dress that cost $4,000, her blonde ringlets perfect, her blue eyes cold and assessing. "My daddy says people like them break things because they don't understand value." Thomas felt the coat slip from his fingers. It hit the floor with a muffled thud that no one noticed because everyone was watching Charlotte descend those stairs with the practiced grace of someone who'd been trained since birth to command rooms. Behind her, 3 other children followed, all from families whose names appeared in Forbes and whose parents controlled more wealth than some nations. Maya's bottom lip quivered, but she didn't cry. That detail struck Thomas harder than anything else, the way this small child had already learned to swallow her pain, to make herself smaller, invisible, unworthy of defense. Grace's hands were shaking as she knelt beside her daughter, whispering urgent apologies to everyone and no one, her voice cracking with humiliation. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Pemberton. I don't know how Maya got in here. I told her to stay in the kitchen. I'm so sorry. We'll leave right away, please. I'm so sorry." Catherine Pemberton, Charlotte's mother, stood near the dessert table in a Chanel suit that could have paid Grace's rent for 6 months. She didn't move to help, didn't correct her daughter's cruelty. Instead, she sipped her champagne and said, in a voice that carried effortlessly across the room, "Grace, dear, I think it's best if you keep better control of your situation. These events aren't appropriate for certain children. They don't understand the environment." Thomas's son James stood frozen near the birthday cake, confusion and shame warring on his young face. He'd invited Maya. Well, not invited exactly, more like insisted his nanny bring her daughter because he wanted more kids at the party, and Maya was nice. But now, watching the adults around him nod in agreement with Mrs. Pemberton, watching his friends smirk at Maya's humiliation, James felt something shift inside him, something uncomfortable and hot that he didn't have words for yet. The thing was, Maya hadn't broken the glass. Thomas had seen what actually happened. He'd witnessed Charlotte deliberately knock the champagne flute off the passing server's tray as Maya walked by, timing it perfectly so the crystal would explode near the small girl's feet. A calculated act of cruelty dressed up as accident, performed by a child who'd learned from experts how to wield power against the powerless, and not a single adult in that room was going to call it out. Not one person would defend this 5-year-old girl who wore second-hand clothes and whose only crime was existing in a space she supposedly didn't belong. By the way, if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who seem to matter more than you, or if you've watched someone be treated as less than human because of circumstances beyond their control, please subscribe to this channel and like this video because these stories matter, because bearing witness matters, and because sometimes understanding that we're not alone in seeing injustice is what keeps us human. Now back to what happened next in that ballroom, because what Thomas Wright decided in that moment would echo through years neither he nor anyone else in that room could have imagined. Thomas walked forward. His footsteps on marble were measured, deliberate, each one a drumbeat that gradually pulled attention away from the spectacle of Grace, trying to gather her daughter and her dignity simultaneously. He'd built a technology empire from a garage startup, had negotiated with presidents and prime ministers, had stared down boardrooms full of men who wanted to destroy him, but nothing had ever made him as angry as watching a child be humiliated for sport. He reached Maya first, knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. Up close, he could see the unshed tears she was fighting, the way her small jaw was clenched, the trembling in her shoulders that she was trying so hard to control. Her eyes, huge, dark, filled with confusion, because she genuinely didn't understand what she'd done wrong, met his. "Maya," Thomas said softly, his voice carrying only to her and Grace, "do you know what I see when I look at you?" Maya shook her head, silent. "I see someone brave," Thomas continued, "because it takes courage to stand in a room where people want you to feel small. And I see someone kind because when you arrived, you said hello to everyone, even though most of them didn't say hello back. That's character, Maya. Real character. The kind money can't buy." Grace's breath hitched. She started to speak, probably another apology, but Thomas held up a gentle hand. Then he stood, still holding Maya's small hand in his, and turned to face the room full of wealthy parents and their entitled children. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Everyone who'd ever negotiated with Thomas Wright knew that expression, the one that meant someone was about to lose everything they'd taken for granted. "Charlotte," Thomas said, his voice conversational, almost pleasant. "Come here, please." Charlotte hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time. Her mother made a small sound of protest, but Thomas's gaze swung to her, and Catherine Pemberton's words died unspoken. Charlotte approached slowly, her earlier confidence evaporating. Thomas didn't kneel this time. He simply looked at the 7-year-old girl in her designer dress and said, "Tell everyone what actually happened to that glass. Tell them how it broke." Silence stretched like taffy, pulled thin and dangerous. Charlotte's face flushed red, then pale. Her mouth opened, closed. Around the room, parents shifted uncomfortably, sensing the trap but unable to see all its dimensions yet. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Wright," Charlotte finally said, but her voice was small, childish, stripped of its earlier cruel authority. "You knocked the glass off the server's tray," Thomas said, still conversational, still pleasant, still absolutely terrifying. "I watched you do it. You timed it so it would fall near Maya. You wanted her to be blamed. You wanted her to be humiliated. And it worked, didn't it? Everyone assumed she was at fault because of who she is and who you are." The ballroom had gone from silent to suffocating. Catherine Pemberton's face was a mask of fury and humiliation, but beneath that, something else flickered. Fear. Because Thomas Wright didn't just have money, he had power. The kind that could end careers, close doors, make people disappear from social circles they'd spent lifetimes climbing into. "How dare you accuse my daughter?" Catherine began, her voice shaking with rage. "I dare," Thomas interrupted, his tone still measured, still calm, "because I watched it happen. And I dare because not one adult in this room was going to correct it. Not one person was going to defend a 5-year-old child. You were all perfectly comfortable watching her be destroyed because her mother works for a living and doesn't wear designer labels." James watched his father with wide eyes, something swelling in his chest that felt like pride mixed with shame. Shame because he hadn't defended Maya either. Pride because his father was doing it now. Marcus Chen, whose family owned half of Manhattan's commercial real estate, cleared his throat. "Thomas, perhaps we're making too much of a children's squabble. Charlotte's just a child herself. Surely, children learn cruelty from somewhere," Thomas said, and his gaze swept the room, landing on each parent with surgical precision. "They learn it from watching how we treat people we consider beneath us. They learn it from observing which humans we defend and which we discard. So no, Marcus, this isn't a children's squabble. This is a mirror, and I don't think any of us like what we're seeing in it." Grace was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, but she'd stopped apologizing. Something in her spine had straightened, watching her employer, her kind, distant, rarely home employer, defend her daughter with a ferocity she'd never dared dream of. Thomas released Maya's hand gently, then pulled his phone from his pocket. Every eye in the room tracked the movement, wondering what calculated destruction he was about to unleash with a simple call. He dialed, waited 2 rings, then spoke with the same pleasant tone he'd maintained throughout. "Robert, it's Thomas Wright. I need you to arrange something for me immediately. You know that toy store, Wonderland Emporium on 5th Avenue? The flagship location? Yes, that one. I want to purchase it. Not a franchise deal, not a partnership. I want to buy the entire company. Contact the owners. Tell them I'm prepared to pay significantly above market value for an immediate sale, and I want the transaction completed within the next 4 hours. Call me back with confirmation." He hung up. The silence in the ballroom was now absolute, crystalline, everyone holding their breath because they couldn't possibly have heard what they'd just heard. Catherine Pemberton laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You're buying a toy store to prove a point? How perfectly absurd. Charlotte, darling, come here. We're leaving. I won't have my daughter subjected to this theatrical nonsense." "I'm not buying it to prove a point," Thomas said, and something in his voice made Catherine freeze mid-turn. "I'm buying it because every child at this party was supposed to receive a gift bag worth approximately $300. My son wanted to share his birthday joy, but I'm watching children who have everything, security, comfort, opportunity, safety, refuse to share even kindness with someone who has so little. So yes, I'm buying the toy store, and then I'm going to have every single toy loaded into trucks and distributed to children who understand what it means to receive something precious." Maya's hand found her mother's. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she understood enough that the man her mother worked for was defending her in a way no one ever had, that somehow this moment of crushing humiliation was transforming into something else, something that made the adults look scared and small. "Every toy?" whispered James, his voice cracking. "But Dad, that's thousands of toys, that's everything," Thomas confirmed, looking at his son directly. "Every toy in that store goes to children in orphanages, shelters, hospitals, refugee centers, children who don't have birthday parties in mansions, children who've never owned a toy that wasn't broken or second-hand, children like Maya, whose mother works 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads and still can't afford the luxuries everyone at this party takes for granted." "But what about me?" James asked, and hearing his own words, something in him shriveled. "I mean, what about my birthday?" Thomas's expression softened slightly. He walked to his son, placed a hand on his shoulder. "James, today you're going to learn something more valuable than any toy could teach you. You're going to learn that having everything means nothing if you can't see the humanity in people who have less. You're going to learn that privilege without compassion is just another word for poverty. Spiritual poverty, the worst kind." James's eyes filled with tears. Around him, his friends, children of senators and CEOs and entertainment moguls, looked similarly stricken. For the first time in their young lives, they were facing consequences. Not punishment exactly, but something more profound. The removal of something they'd taken for granted because someone they deemed unworthy was suffering. Thomas's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Confirmed. The company's been sold to me. The Wright Family Foundation now owns Wonderland Emporium. I want every toy boxed and loaded within 3 hours. Hire as many people as necessary. Send the trucks to..." He rattled off addresses of children's hospitals, homeless shelters, orphanages across New York City. Places most people in this ballroom had never thought about, much less visited. "This is insane," muttered David Rothstein, whose hedge fund had just been featured in the Wall Street Journal. "You're punishing children for being children. Charlotte made a mistake, yes, but my daughter did nothing wrong." Catherine Pemberton's voice cracked across the ballroom like a whip. "She's 7 years old. She's old enough to learn that actions have consequences," Thomas said, and now the pleasantness was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper, more final. "She's old enough to understand that cruelty isn't acceptable just because you can get away with it. And honestly, Catherine, she learned that cruelty from somewhere. Children aren't born knowing how to humiliate others. They're taught. So yes, she's young, but if we don't correct this now, in 10 years she'll be the woman sneering at service workers, and in 20 years she'll be teaching her own children that some humans matter less than others." The truth of that statement hung in the air like smoke. Several parents looked away, unable to meet Thomas's gaze because they recognized themselves in that trajectory. They saw their own casual cruelties, their own careless dismissals of people they considered beneath their notice, reflected back at them. Grace finally found her voice, though it came out hoarse, uncertain. "Mr. Wright, you don't have to. Maya and I can just leave. You've already done so much. You defended her, and that's more than I ever..." Her voice broke. "We don't need charity, we just need dignity. That's all we've ever needed." Thomas turned to Grace, and his expression transformed into something gentler, almost reverent. "This isn't charity, Grace. Charity is condescension dressed up as kindness. This is justice, there's a difference, and your daughter deserves to see that sometimes, just sometimes, the world corrects itself. That cruelty doesn't always win." He knelt down to Maya again. this small child who'd witnessed things no 5-year-old should have to process. "Maya, I have a question for you. What's your favorite toy? The one thing you love most in the whole world?" Maya's voice was tiny, almost inaudible. "My bunny, Mr. Floppy-Ears. Mama got him for me at a yard sale when I was 3. His ear is torn and his eye is missing, but he's mine. And if someone asked you to share Mr. Floppy-Ears, what would you do?" Maya thought about this, her small face serious. "I'd share because sharing is good. My teacher says sharing means you care about other people's happiness, not just your own." Thomas nodded slowly. "Even if sharing meant you might not get Mr. Floppy-Ears back?" Maya's eyes widened, fear flickering through them, but after a long moment she nodded. "Even then, because being kind is more important than having things." Thomas stood, and when he looked at the assembled wealthy parents and their children, there were tears in his eyes. Actual tears. This 5-year-old child, whose mother makes in a year what most of you spend on a vacation, understands something that every person in this room with advanced degrees and stock portfolios has forgotten. She understands that humanity trumps ownership, that compassion costs nothing but pays everything. And she learned that not from privilege, but from struggle, from watching her mother work multiple jobs and still find energy to teach her about kindness. The first truck arrived 90 minutes later, then a second, then a third. The loading crews worked with efficient speed, and within 3 hours, everything from Wonderland Emporium was being distributed across New York City. Stuffed animals, building blocks, dolls, action figures, board games, art supplies, everything. The birthday party had long since dissolved into chaos. Most families had left in various states of fury and humiliation. The Pembertons departed first, Catherine hissing threats about social consequences and business repercussions that Thomas absorbed with the same pleasant expression. Marcus Chen tried reasoning, explaining that Thomas was overreacting, that this would damage relationships worth millions. Thomas simply continued coordinating the distribution of toys, his phone pressed to his ear, his instructions clear and unwavering. By sunset, James sat alone in the now empty ballroom, surrounded by party decorations that seemed grotesque in their exuberance. No gifts, no toys, just expensive decorations for a party that had imploded spectacularly. Grace and Maya had tried to leave multiple times, but Thomas had gently insisted they stay. "I need you both to see this through," he'd said. "I need Maya to witness that standing up for what's right doesn't mean you walk away when things get uncomfortable. It means you see it through to the end." Now, with the sun setting through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across marble floors, Thomas sat down beside his son. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I hate you," James finally said, his voice small and broken. "Everyone's going to hate me at school. Charlotte's mom is friends with my teacher. Marcus's son is my best friend. You've ruined everything." "I know," Thomas said simply, "and I'm sorry you're hurting." "That's real, and I don't dismiss it. But James, I need you to understand something. Today you learned that your comfort isn't worth another person's dignity. You learned that being liked by cruel people isn't actually valuable. And yes, you lost things. Toys, friends, easy social navigation. But Maya," he gestured to where Maya sat with her mother near the kitchen entrance, exhausted but quiet. "Maya loses things every single day. Opportunities, respect, safety, the assumption of innocence. She loses those things not because of choices she made, but because of circumstances she was born into." "But I didn't do anything wrong," James protested, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't hurt Maya. I invited her. I wanted her here." "You didn't defend her either," Thomas said, and his voice was gentle but unyielding. "When Charlotte attacked her, you stayed silent. When the adults in this room blamed her for something she didn't do, you stayed silent. And I understand, you're 8 years old. Standing up to your friends is terrifying, but silence in the face of cruelty is its own form of violence, James. It's the violence of permission. It tells the cruel person that what they're doing is acceptable." James was openly sobbing now, his small body shaking. "I didn't know what to do. I was scared." "I know," Thomas said, pulling his son close. "Fear is real, but courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting right, despite being afraid. Today you watched a 5-year-old girl be braver than every adult in this room combined, because she stood in the middle of her humiliation and didn't lash out. She didn't blame anyone. She just existed, vulnerable and hurt, and survived it. That's courage, James, real courage, the kind that doesn't wear designer clothes or come with trust funds." Grace approached hesitantly, Maya's hand in hers. "Mr. Wright, it's getting late. We should go. Thank you for everything. I don't have words for what you did today. No one has ever—" Her voice caught. "No one has ever stood up for us like that." Thomas stood, and when he looked at Grace, there was respect in his eyes. The kind of respect one gives to someone who survived wars others never had to fight. "Grace, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before answering. What would you do if I offered you a better position, more money, better hours, benefits, security?" Grace's breath caught. I'd say thank you. I'd ask what I need to do to earn it." "No," Thomas said softly. "That's not what I'm offering. I'm not offering you charity or pity. I'm offering you what you've already earned through years of dignified work, through raising a daughter who understands compassion better than children raised with every advantage, through surviving in a world that's been hostile to you at every turn. You've already earned it, Grace. So I'm just correcting an injustice that should have never existed." Maya tugged on her mother's hand. "Mama, what does that mean?" Grace knelt down, tears streaming freely now. "It means, baby, that sometimes good things happen, not because we're special or important, but because someone finally saw us, really saw us." But what Maya didn't know, what none of them could have known in that moment, was that the real transformation was just beginning. Because across the city, in hospitals and shelters and orphanages, children who'd never owned anything new were opening boxes filled with toys from Wonderland Emporium. And among those children was a 6-year-old refugee girl named Amara, who'd fled her country with nothing but trauma and silence, who hadn't spoken a word in 8 months, who existed in a shelter barely holding itself together. When the workers delivered the boxes of toys to that shelter, the director had wept. When they'd opened the boxes and started distributing toys to children accustomed to disappointment, something magical happened. Not fairy tale magical, but human magical. The kind that occurs when people used to having nothing suddenly receive something precious. Amara had stood at the back of the group, silent as always, her dark eyes tracking the other children's joy with detachment. She'd learned not to want things. Wanting led to pain, and she'd had enough pain for several lifetimes. But then a worker had placed a stuffed giraffe in her hands, brand new, yellow and soft and impossibly clean, and something in Amara had cracked open. She'd clutched that giraffe against her chest, and for the first time in 8 months, sound had emerged from her throat. Not words, not yet, but a sound. Raw, broken, human. The shelter director had called the foundation immediately, trying to express what had happened, trying to explain that this gift wasn't just toys, it was proof that the world could still be kind, that humanity still existed somewhere beneath all the cruelty and chaos. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Thomas received an email from the shelter. It included a video of Amara speaking for the first time, telling her therapist about her giraffe, about how it made her feel safe, about how maybe if toys could be kind, people could be kind too. Thomas watched that video 3 times, alone in his office, while employees worked outside his door and markets fluctuated and empires rose and fell. And he made a decision that would ripple forward in ways he couldn't yet imagine. He called Grace. "I have something I need to tell Maya. Can you both come to my office tomorrow?" The next day, in that office overlooking Manhattan, Thomas showed Maya the video of Amara, explained, in language a 5-year-old could understand, that toys had been distributed to children who needed them, that one little girl had started speaking again because she'd received something soft and safe in a world that had been hard and dangerous. Maya had watched with huge eyes, processing. Then she'd said something that would change the trajectory of several lives. "Mr. Floppiers, the girl in the video, she needs Mr. Floppiers more than me, because I have my mama and she has nobody." Grace had made a sound of protest. "Maya, no. Mr. Floppiers is yours. You don't have to—" "I want to," Maya said, her voice certain in the way children's voices are when they know something adults have forgotten. "Sharing means you care about other people's happiness," my teacher said. "And the girl in the video isn't happy yet, but maybe Mr. Floppiers can help." Thomas had felt something shift in his chest, tectonic, permanent. This child, who owned almost nothing, was willing to give away her most precious possession to a stranger she'd never meet, not because anyone forced her, not because she expected anything in return, but because her capacity for empathy exceeded the combined compassion of every wealthy parent who'd been at that birthday party. "Maya," Thomas had said slowly, "if you give Mr. Floppiers to Amara, you won't get him back. Are you absolutely certain?" Maya had nodded, clutching the worn, damaged stuffed bunny against her chest one final time. Then she'd held it out to Thomas, her small hand trembling but steady. "Give him to the girl. Tell her Mr. Floppies is very good at listening when you're scared, and tell her someone loves her even if she doesn't know who yet." Grace had broken down completely, pride and heartbreak mixing into something transcendent. Thomas had accepted the bunny with the reverence of someone receiving a holy relic, because in that moment, that's exactly what it was. Proof that humanity could survive poverty, survive cruelty, survive a world designed to crush it. Mr. Floppiers had been delivered to Amara the next day, along with a note written in Maya's careful kindergarten handwriting. "This is Mr. Floppiers. He is very good. He will keep you safe. From your friend Maya." Amara had held Mr. Floppiers and the new giraffe together, and she'd spoken her first full sentence since arriving in America. "I have friends now. 2 friends. Maybe more friends are coming." The shelter director had called Thomas again, this time sobbing openly on the phone, trying to explain that this exchange, this child-to-child compassion across circumstance and trauma, had created a ripple effect in the shelter. Other children had started sharing their new toys. Kids who'd hoarded every scrap in survival mode suddenly trusted enough to gift things to each other. The toys weren't just toys anymore. They were symbols, proof that kindness existed, proof that they mattered. The news about Thomas Wright's toy store purchase spread through Manhattan's elite social circles like wildfire through dry timber. Within 48 hours, every major newspaper had picked up the story. Within a week, it had gone viral internationally. The headlines varied in tone. Some praised his radical compassion, others mocked what they called performative philanthropy. But everyone had an opinion about the billionaire who'd bought an entire toy store to teach his son's friends about empathy. What the headlines missed, what the think pieces and social media debates failed to capture, was the quiet revolution happening in the spaces between the spectacle. Because while journalists debated Thomas's methods and psychologists analyzed the impact on the children involved, real lives were transforming in ways no one was tracking. James Wright returned to school the following Monday to discover his social landscape had been scorched to ash. Charlotte Pemberton wouldn't look at him. Marcus Chen's son, his former best friend, had been forbidden from speaking to him. Teachers who'd once smiled warmly now offered tight, professional courtesy. At lunch, James sat alone at a table designed for 8, his expensive meal untouched, watching clusters of children whisper and glance in his direction. By Wednesday, someone had written "charity case" on his locker in permanent marker. By Friday, his backpack had been accidentally knocked into a mud puddle during recess. The cruelty was surgical, calculated, designed to humiliate without leaving evidence adults would punish. James endured it with a silence that would have made Maya proud, though he didn't have the framework to understand that yet. He came home each day, went to his room, and sat in the space where his toys used to be. Thomas had replaced nothing. The empty shelves were a constant reminder, a physical manifestation of consequence that pressed against James's chest like a weight he couldn't name. On the second Friday after the party, Thomas found his son sitting in that empty room, staring at nothing, tears streaming silently down his face. He didn't announce himself, just sat down beside James on the floor, their backs against the wall, 2 people existing in the wreckage of a decision that had cost them both something precious. "I still hate you," James whispered, but there was less conviction in it now, more confusion, like he was testing the words to see if they still fit. "I know," Thomas said, "and you're allowed to hate me. Anger is honest, it's real. Don't apologize for feeling what you feel." "Charlotte's mom called you a monster," James said, his voice hollow. "She told everyone you're unstable, that you're dangerous, that you humiliated children for attention. Marcus's dad said you're having a breakdown and everyone should stay away from our family until you get help." Thomas absorbed this without visible reaction, though something in his jaw tightened. "And what do you think, James? Do you think I'm a monster?" James was quiet for a long time, wrestling with something too large for his 8-year-old framework. I think you made everyone hate us. I think you took away everything I had. I think you ruined my life for someone I barely know." He paused, breath hitching. "But I also think Maya didn't deserve what happened to her, and I think I should have said something, and I didn't. And that makes me—" His voice cracked completely. "That makes me like them, like Charlotte, like all of them." Thomas felt something break open in his chest, painful and necessary. "James, you're 8 years old. 8. You're not supposed to have all the answers. You're not supposed to be perfectly brave. You're supposed to be learning, growing, making mistakes, and figuring out who you want to be. And right now, in this moment, you're doing something incredibly difficult. You're sitting with discomfort instead of running from it. You're questioning yourself instead of just blaming me. That's growth, son. Real growth. The kind that hurts. I don't want growth, James said, his voice small and broken. I want my friends back. I want people to stop whispering about me. I want to stop feeling like I'm being punished for something I didn't do. You're not being punished, Thomas said gently. You're experiencing consequences. There's a difference. Punishment is arbitrary, designed to cause pain. Consequences are natural results of living in a world where actions matter. And yes, sometimes consequences feel unfair. Sometimes you suffer for things that weren't entirely your fault. But that's also what Maya experiences every single day. The consequence of being born to a mother who works multiple jobs. The consequence of not having designer clothes or the right last name. She didn't choose those consequences any more than you chose yours. James turned to look at his father, really look at him, and something shifted in his young face. Do you think she hates me, Maya, for not defending her? I don't know, Thomas admitted, but I think Maya understands something about forgiveness that most adults never learn. I think she knows that people are complicated, that fear makes us do things we regret, and that one moment of silence doesn't define who you are forever. The question isn't whether Maya hates you. The question is whether you can forgive yourself and do better next time. What if there isn't a next time? James whispered. What if everyone just keeps hating me forever? Thomas pulled his son close, feeling the small body shake with suppressed sobs. Then you learn to live with being hated by people whose values don't align with yours. And you find new people, people who see the world the way you're learning to see it. People who understand that kindness matters more than status. It won't be easy, James. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but I promise you, it's worth it. Because the alternative is becoming like Charlotte's mother, wealthy, powerful, socially connected, and spiritually bankrupt. They sat like that for a long time, father and son, in a room emptied of toys, but slowly filling with something more valuable, understanding. Not complete understanding, not yet, but the beginning of it. The seed of wisdom that would take years to fully grow. Meanwhile, across the city, Grace was experiencing her own transformation. True to his word, Thomas had restructured her position. She was now the director of household operations, with a salary that made her cry when she saw the first paycheck, health insurance, retirement benefits, paid vacation, things she'd stopped dreaming about years ago, things that seemed like fairy tales told to other people. But the money, while life-changing, wasn't the most significant shift. It was the respect. The way Thomas consulted her opinion on household decisions, the way he introduced her to visitors as an essential member of his team, not as the help. The way he'd enrolled Maya in the same private school James attended, covering tuition completely, framing it not as charity, but as an employee benefit. Grace had protested that last part. Mr. Right, I can't. That school costs more than I used to make in a year. It's too much. Maya can stay at her public school. She's happy there. Thomas had looked at her with that same steady gaze he'd used in the ballroom. Grace, I'm not offering this because I pity Maya. I'm offering it because she's brilliant, curious, and deserves the same educational opportunities as every other child. And honestly, I think James needs her there. He needs to see that friendship can transcend social class. He needs a friend who'll challenge him to be better, not just reflect his privilege back at him. So Maya had started at Ashford Academy the same week James returned after the birthday party disaster. She'd walked through those pristine hallways in her carefully pressed second-hand uniform, her backpack worn but clean, her head held high despite the stares and whispers. The first week was brutal. Children who'd been at the party recognized her, and the story had spread, embellished, distorted, weaponized. Maya was the poor girl who got James's dad to buy her things. She was the reason James lost all his toys. She was a symbol of disruption, of consequences that had touched their comfortable world. And children blamed her the way people always blame the vulnerable for forcing them to confront their own cruelty. But Maya had survived worse. She'd survived eviction notices and empty refrigerators, and watching her mother work until exhaustion became a permanent state. She'd survived being invisible in spaces where she wasn't wanted. This was different. This was visible hostility, which meant at least people saw her, and being seen even in anger was better than being erased. On her third day at Ashford Academy during lunch, Maya sat alone at a table in the corner of the cafeteria. She'd brought lunch from home, her mother's carefully prepared meal in a simple container, nothing like the catered lunches other students ordered. She was eating quietly, reading a library book, when a shadow fell across her table. James stood there, holding his lunch tray, his face a mixture of fear and determination. Around them, the cafeteria had gone quiet, everyone watching to see what would happen. This was the moment that would define social hierarchies, that would determine whether James could salvage any of his former status or whether he'd be permanently exiled. "Can I sit here?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya looked up from her book, her dark eyes assessing. For a long moment she didn't answer, and James felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the weight of every eye in that cafeteria, felt the future balancing on this 5-year-old girl's response. Then Maya nodded. "Okay." James sat down and the cafeteria erupted in whispers. Charlotte Pemberton made a sound of disgust from across the room. Marcus Chen's son shook his head in disbelief. Teachers monitoring lunch exchanged glances, uncertain whether to intervene or let this play out. For several minutes neither James nor Maya spoke. They just ate their lunches, existing in parallel, while around them the social order recalibrated to accommodate this new reality. Finally James said, "I'm sorry for not defending you at the party. When everyone, I should have said something, and I didn't, and I'm really, really sorry." Maya considered this, taking another bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "My mama says being sorry is only real if you do different next time. Are you going to do different?" "Yes," James said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I promise. Next time I'll say something, even if I'm scared. Even if everyone hates me, I'll say something." "Okay," Maya said simply, "then we can be friends." And just like that, with the casual certainty of children who haven't yet learned to complicate forgiveness, they were friends. Not perfect friends, not without complications, but friends nonetheless, bound by shared experience and the strange alchemy of consequence that had brought them together. What neither of them knew, what no one in that cafeteria could have predicted, was that their friendship would become the foundation for something much larger, because other children were watching, children who'd felt uncomfortable at that birthday party, but hadn't known how to articulate why. Children who'd been taught to value status, but were starting to question whether that teaching was correct. Children who saw James choose Maya over social acceptance and wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was a different way to exist in the world. Slowly, cautiously, a few other students started sitting at their table. First, a girl named Sophie, whose parents were diplomats, who'd lived in 6 countries and understood that humanity transcended borders. Then a boy named David, whose older brother had special needs, who'd learned early that worth wasn't determined by ability or appearance. Then others, one by one, children who'd been on the periphery of the popular groups, who'd never quite fit, who saw in James and Maya's friendship permission to be different. By the end of Maya's first month at Ashford Academy, their table had 8 regular occupants. By the end of the semester, it was the most diverse table in the cafeteria, economically, racially, socially. It became known, half mockingly, half admiringly, as the island of misfit toys, a reference that the students themselves eventually embraced. Charlotte Pemberton watched this transformation with increasing fury. Her own social circle had contracted, not because people disliked her, but because her cruelty had been exposed in a way that made others uncomfortable. Parents who'd once encouraged their children to befriend the Pembertons now quietly suggested distance. Not because they'd suddenly developed moral compasses, but because Thomas Wright's public stance had shifted the social calculus. Being associated with overt cruelty was now a liability in certain circles, and Manhattan's elite were nothing if not pragmatic. Catherine Pemberton, Charlotte's mother, had tried multiple approaches to rehabilitate their image. She'd increased charitable donations, ensuring photographers captured her generosity. She'd given interviews about learning experiences and growth opportunities. She'd even attempted to arrange a reconciliation meeting with Thomas, which he'd declined with polite finality. But the damage was done. The Pembertons were no longer untouchable. They were cautionary tales, and Charlotte, at 7 years old, was learning a brutal lesson about consequences, that cruelty might feel powerful in the moment, but its aftermath could be isolating and permanent. 6 months after the birthday party, Thomas received an unexpected visitor at his office. Catherine Pemberton, dressed in understated elegance, her expression carefully neutral, requested 15 minutes of his time. His assistant had been instructed to refuse her, but something in Thomas's instinct made him accept. Catherine sat across from his desk, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap. For a long moment, she didn't speak, and Thomas didn't fill the silence. He simply waited, patient and unyielding. "You destroyed my daughter's childhood," Catherine finally said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "She has nightmares. She's seeing a therapist. She's been ostracized by children she's known since birth, all because of one mistake, one moment of childish cruelty that you've turned into a permanent mark against her." Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I didn't destroy anything, Catherine. I held up a mirror. What you're seeing reflected back, that's not my creation, that's yours." "She's 7 years old," Catherine's voice cracked, the careful control slipping. "She's a child. She doesn't deserve to be punished for the rest of her life." "Neither did Maya," Thomas said quietly. "But you were perfectly comfortable with Maya being punished, humiliated, blamed, erased, for the crime of existing in a space you didn't think she belonged in. So forgive me if I don't have much sympathy for Charlotte's nightmares. Maya has nightmares too. The difference is, Maya's nightmares come from a lifetime of being treated as less than human, while Charlotte's come from finally experiencing consequences." Catherine's hands trembled in her lap. "What do you want from us, an apology? Public penance? Tell me what will make this right, and I'll do it. Just stop. Stop punishing my daughter for my mistakes." Thomas studied her for a long moment, seeing not just the polished exterior but the desperation beneath it. "I don't want anything from you, Catherine. This isn't about revenge or punishment. This is about Charlotte learning at 7, a lesson that will save her from becoming you at 40. She's learning that people matter, that cruelty has costs, that privilege doesn't insulate you from consequences. Those are valuable lessons. Painful, yes, but valuable." "And what about forgiveness?" Catherine whispered. "What about second chances? Or does your moral superiority not extend to grace?" "Forgiveness isn't mine to give," Thomas said. "It's Maya's and Grace's. They're the ones Charlotte hurt. If you want forgiveness, perhaps you should ask them, not me. But I suspect you won't, because that would require you to see them as fully human, as people whose forgiveness matters, and I don't think you're there yet." Catherine stood abruptly, her composure fracturing completely. "You're not a hero, Thomas. You're a bully with better PR. You used your power to crush a child, and history will remember that." "Perhaps," Thomas acknowledged, "or perhaps history will remember that I used my power to defend a child no one else would defend. Either way, I can live with my choices." "Can you live with yours?" Catherine left without answering, and Thomas sat alone in his office for a long time afterward, wondering if he'd done the right thing. Not about the toy store, he had no regrets about that, but about Charlotte, about whether exposing a 7-year-old's cruelty to public scrutiny was justice or just another form of cruelty dressed up in righteous language. He didn't have an answer. He suspected he never would. Some moral questions don't have clean resolutions. They just have consequences that ripple forward, touching lives in ways you can't predict or control. 3 years passed. Maya thrived at Ashford Academy, her natural intelligence and curiosity blossoming in an environment that finally challenged her. She excelled in mathematics and literature, won the school science fair 2 years running, and became known for a quiet kindness that drew people to her. Teachers who'd initially been skeptical of Thomas's charity case found themselves genuinely impressed by her capabilities and character. James grew too, shedding the entitled carelessness of his early childhood and developing into a thoughtful, socially conscious young man. He started a club at school focused on community service, organizing trips to the same shelters and orphanages that had received the toys from Wonderland Emporium. He volunteered at soup kitchens, tutored younger students, and became known not for his father's wealth but for his genuine compassion. The friendship between James and Maya deepened into something rare and precious, a bond built not on shared privilege but on shared values. They challenged each other, supported each other, and created a model of friendship that influenced the entire school culture. Ashford Academy, once a bastion of unchecked privilege, slowly transformed into a place where character mattered as much as pedigree. Charlotte Pemberton, meanwhile, had taken a different path. The therapy her mother mentioned had actually helped, though not in the way Catherine had intended. Charlotte's therapist had gently but firmly helped her understand the impact of her actions, the systems of privilege she'd been born into, and the choice she faced about who she wanted to become. It was painful, ongoing work, but Charlotte was doing it. On a Tuesday afternoon in the spring of Maya's 8th grade year, Charlotte approached her in the library. Maya was studying for exams, her books spread across a table, completely absorbed in her work. She didn't notice Charlotte until the older girl cleared her throat softly. Maya looked up, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear exactly, but wariness. The memory of that birthday party, though years old, was still there, still sharp. "Can I talk to you?" Charlotte asked, her voice uncertain in a way that would have been unimaginable years ago. "Just for a minute. If you don't want to, I understand. I'll leave." Maya studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the empty chair across from her. "Okay." Charlotte sat down, her hands twisting in her lap, her carefully cultivated confidence nowhere in evidence. "I've been wanting to say this for 3 years, but I didn't know how. And my therapist says I shouldn't make this about me, that apologies aren't supposed to send to the person apologizing, but I don't know how else to do this, so I'm just going to say it." She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry for what I did at James's birthday party, for humiliating you, for being cruel, for everything. You didn't deserve any of that. And I've spent 3 years learning why I did it, understanding the systems that taught me it was okay, but none of that excuses it. I hurt you, badly, and I'm sorry." Maya was quiet, her expression unreadable. Around them, the library hummed with quiet activity, students studying, whispering, existing in their own worlds, unaware of the significance of this moment. "Why now?" Maya finally asked. "Why are you apologizing now, after 3 years?" Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Because I finally understand what I took from you. Not just dignity or safety in that moment, but the assumption that spaces are for you, that you belong. I took that from you, and I can't give it back, but I can at least acknowledge what I did, and I can tell you that I'm different now, not perfect, not even close, but different. And that's because of what happened. Because your dad," she paused, corrected herself. "Because Mr. Wright held up a mirror, and I finally saw what I was becoming, and it was ugly, and I didn't want to be that person anymore." Maya absorbed this, her young face serious, processing something most adults never successfully navigate, the complexity of forgiveness. "I don't know if I forgive you," she said finally, her voice gentle but honest. "I don't know if I can. What you did, it still hurts sometimes. When I walk into rooms and people stare, I remember that party. I remember feeling like I didn't deserve to exist, and that's hard to forgive." "I understand," Charlotte said, tears spilling over now. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I'm sorry I didn't before." Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you for saying that. It matters. Maybe not enough to erase what happened, but it matters." Charlotte stood to leave, but Maya's voice stopped her. "Charlotte, I hope you keep doing the work. I hope you keep becoming different, because the world needs people who can change, who can look at themselves honestly and choose to be better. That's actually really brave." Charlotte left the library crying, but they were different tears than she'd shed 3 years ago. These were tears of release, of accountability, of the painful but necessary process of growth. She wasn't absolved, she wasn't forgiven, but she was seen, truly seen by the person she'd hurt most, and that was its own form of grace. Maya sat alone at her table for a long time after Charlotte left, staring at her textbooks without seeing them, processing emotions too complex for easy categorization. Eventually, she pulled out her phone and texted her mother, "Charlotte Pemberton apologized to me today. I don't know how I feel about it. Can we talk when you get home?" Grace's response came immediately. "Of course, baby. I'm proud of you for listening." That took courage. Maya smiled slightly, then returned to her studies, carrying the weight of that conversation, but also somehow feeling lighter than she had in years. The following week, Thomas received a call from the shelter, where Amara, the refugee girl who'd received Mr. Floppier's, was living. The director's voice was excited, almost breathless. "Mr. Wright, I have news. Amara's been accepted into a specialized program for gifted children. She's extraordinary, Mr. Wright. Brilliant. And she credits everything to that stuffed bunny Maya gave her. She says Mr. Floppier's taught her she was worth something, that if a stranger would give her something precious, maybe she was precious too." Thomas felt emotion tighten his throat. "Where is Amara now? Is she still at the shelter?" "She's been placed with a foster family. A good one. They're adopting her. She's going to be okay, Mr. Wright. She's going to have a real life." Thomas hung up and immediately called Grace. I need Maya to know something. Can you both come to my office this afternoon?" When Maya and Grace arrived, Thomas showed Maya the update about Amara. He pulled up photos the foster family had shared. Amara smiling, holding Mr. Floppier's, surrounded by books and art supplies, looking healthy and safe and loved. Maya stared at the photos with huge eyes, tears streaming down her face. "She's okay? She's really okay?" "She's more than okay," Thomas said gently. "She's thriving, and it started with your gift, Maya, with your willingness to give away something precious because you understood that someone else needed it more. That act of compassion, it changed her life. It gave her hope when she had none. It taught her she was worth loving. And now she's going to have opportunities she never dreamed possible." Maya was sobbing now, but they were joyful tears, the kind that come from witnessing goodness in a world that often feels devoid of it. Grace held her daughter close, crying too, overwhelmed by pride and love and the strange, beautiful trajectory their lives had taken. "I want to meet her," Maya said suddenly, looking up at Thomas with fierce determination. "Amara, I want to meet her. Can I? Is that allowed?" Thomas smiled. "I think that can be arranged." 2 weeks later, in a park in Brooklyn, two girls met for the first time. Maya, now 13, tall and graceful, carrying herself with quiet confidence. Amara, 11, smaller, still bearing the physical marks of early trauma, but with eyes that sparkled with intelligence and hope. They stood facing each other for a moment, shy and uncertain, while Thomas and Grace and Amara's adoptive parents watched from a respectful distance. Then Amara held up Mr. Floppier's, worn now from years of constant companionship, his remaining eye slightly loose, his torn ear carefully stitched. "Thank you," Amara said, her English accented but clear. "Thank you for giving me hope when I had none. Thank you for teaching me that strangers can be kind. Thank you for Mr. Floppier's. He saved my life." Maya stepped forward and hugged Amara, and both girls cried, holding each other. Two children from vastly different circumstances, connected by an act of compassion that had rippled forward in ways neither could have imagined. "You saved your own life," Maya said fiercely. "You survived, you kept going. Mr. Floppier's was just a reminder that you're worth saving, but you did the actual work of surviving." They spent the afternoon together, talking, laughing, sharing stories. Amara told Maya about her journey from her home country, about the trauma and loss, but also about the foster family who loved her, about the school where she was excelling, about her dreams of becoming a doctor so she could help other refugees. Maya told Amara about the birthday party, about the transformation it had sparked, about learning that privilege and compassion could coexist, but only through constant, intentional effort, about James and their friendship, about Charlotte's apology, about the complicated, messy work of forgiveness and growth. As the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the two girls sat on a park bench, Mr. Floppier's between them, their shoulders touching, their voices soft, with the intimacy of people who recognize each other's souls. "Do you ever wonder why it happened?" Amara asked. "Why Mr. Wright defended you? Why he bought all those toys? Why any of it happened the way it did?" Maya thought about this, watching the sunset, feeling the weight of years of transformation pressing against her chest. I think sometimes the universe corrects itself. Not always, not even usually, but sometimes. And I think Mr. Wright was just brave enough to be the instrument of that correction, to use his power for something good instead of just protecting it. "I want to be like that," Amara said softly. "When I grow up, when I have power, I want to use it to correct things, to defend people who can't defend themselves, to be the kind of person who sees injustice and doesn't just walk past it." "Me too," Maya said. "That's exactly what I want too." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Two girls who'd been shaped by trauma and compassion in equal measure, who carried within them the seeds of the people they would become, people who would change the world not through grand gestures, but through consistent daily choices to see humanity in everyone they encountered. 5 years later, Maya graduated from Ashford Academy as valedictorian. Her speech, delivered to a packed auditorium, didn't mention the birthday party directly. But everyone who'd been there, everyone who knew the story, heard the echoes of it in her words. "We live in a world that teaches us to value things over people, status over character, comfort over justice," Maya said, her voice clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the room. "We're taught that some humans matter more than others, that privilege is something to protect rather than share, that compassion is weakness, and cruelty is strength. But I'm here to tell you that everything we've been taught is wrong, dead wrong, and I know this not because I'm smarter than anyone else, but because I've lived both sides of that equation. I've been the person dismissed as worthless, and I've been given opportunities that transformed my life. And the difference between those two realities wasn't my worth. My worth never changed. The difference was whether people chose to see my humanity. In the audience, Thomas Wright sat beside Grace, both of them crying openly. James sat on Thomas's other side, his own eyes wet, his expression proud and awed. Scattered throughout the auditorium were the other students who'd sat at the Island of Misfit Toys table, who'd learned through Maya and James's friendship that there were different ways to exist in the world. Charlotte Pemberton sat in the back row, having come despite not being invited, despite knowing she might not be welcome. She listened to Maya's speech with tears streaming down her face, understanding that she was hearing the voice of someone she'd tried to destroy years ago, someone who'd survived and thrived and become extraordinary, not despite that cruelty, but through the alchemy of transforming pain into purpose. After the ceremony, after the photographs and congratulations and celebrations, Maya found Thomas standing alone near the parking lot, staring up at the night sky. "Thank you," Maya said simply, coming to stand beside him, "for everything, for defending me when no one else would, for changing my life, for teaching me that power can be used for good." Thomas looked at her, this brilliant young woman who'd grown from a frightened 5-year-old into someone who would undoubtedly change the world, and he felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or validation, or simply the knowledge that some decisions, however costly, are worth making. "You don't need to thank me, Maya. You did this, you survived, you thrived, you became exactly who you were always meant to be. I just removed some obstacles. The rest was all you." "That's not true," Maya said gently. "You gave me something no one else ever had, the belief that I deserved to take up space in the world, that my existence mattered, that I was worth defending, and that belief, it changed everything. It gave me permission to dream bigger than survival, to imagine a future where I could help others the way you helped me." Thomas pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, held it out to her. "I've established a trust fund in your name, enough to cover college, graduate school, whatever you need. But there's a condition." Maya took the envelope, her expression wary. "What condition?" "That you use it not just for yourself, but to create opportunities for others. Scholarships, programs, whatever you envision. The money is yours, but the mission is to multiply the impact, to be for other children what I try to be for you, someone who sees their worth when the world tells them they're worthless." Maya opened the envelope, saw the figure, and gasped. It was more money than she'd ever imagined, more than she could process. "Mr. Wright, I can't. This is too much. I can't accept this." "You can," Thomas said firmly, "and you will, because this isn't charity, Maya. This is investment. I'm investing in the person you're becoming, in the work you're going to do, in the lives you're going to change. Take it, use it wisely, and prove to the world that compassion isn't weakness. It's the most powerful force for transformation that exists." Maya threw her arms around Thomas, hugging him with the fierce gratitude of someone who understands exactly how rare and precious true advocacy is. "I won't let you down, I promise. I'll use this to change everything." "I know you will," Thomas said, holding her close. "I've always known." 10 years after the birthday party, Maya opened the first of what would become a network of community centers in underserved neighborhoods across New York City. The centers offered after-school programs, tutoring, mental health services, art classes, and most importantly, a space where children who felt invisible could be seen. She named the first center Mr. Floppier's House, in honor of the stuffed bunny that had started everything. Amara, now a medical student, volunteered there weekly, providing health screenings and mentorship to refugee children. James, who'd gone into non-profit law, handled all the legal work pro bono, ensuring the centers had the structural support to sustain themselves long-term. The opening ceremony was attended by hundreds of people, families from the neighborhood, donors, volunteers, and media, covering what had become a feel-good story about a young woman who'd overcome poverty to create opportunities for others. But the moment that mattered most happened quietly, away from cameras and speeches. Charlotte Pemberton, now 24, and working as a social worker herself, approached Maya in a quiet corner of the new center. "I know I'm probably not welcome here," Charlotte said, her voice uncertain. And I'll leave if you want me to, but I wanted you to know, I wanted you to see, that I've spent the last 10 years trying to become someone worthy of your forgiveness. I work with at-risk youth now, kids who've been taught that cruelty is power just like I was taught, and I try to show them a different way. I try to be for them what Mr. Right was for me, a mirror that reflects who they could become instead of who they've been. Maya studied Charlotte for a long moment, seeing not the cruel 7-year-old from the birthday party, but the woman who'd done the hard work of transformation. I forgive you, Maya said finally, and she meant it. Not because you've earned it, or because enough time has passed, but because holding on to that anger doesn't serve me anymore. You hurt me. That's true, but you also changed. And that matters. That matters a lot. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I don't deserve that, but thank you. None of us deserve grace, Maya said gently. That's what makes it grace. We just have to be brave enough to accept it and wise enough to pass it forward. They stood together in that community center, two women shaped by a moment of cruelty years ago, both transformed by the consequences of that moment, both committed to ensuring that other children wouldn't have to learn empathy through trauma. Thomas Wright, now in his 60s, stood with Grace watching this exchange from across the room. Grace, who'd become not just an employee, but a true friend, leaned against his shoulder and said softly, "You did good, Thomas. Look at what you started. Look at what they've all become." "I didn't start anything," Thomas said, his voice rough with emotion. "I just refused to look away. The rest, all of this is them. This is Maya and James, and even Charlotte choosing every single day to be better than the world taught them to be. This is the compound interest of compassion, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." That night after the ceremony, after the crowds dispersed, Maya sat alone in the empty community center, surrounded by art supplies and books and games, thinking about the 5-year-old girl she'd been, standing in a ballroom surrounded by broken glass and broken assumptions. She thought about Mr. Floppier's, now carefully preserved in a display case in the center, a symbol of the power of giving away what you love most. She thought about Amara, about James, about Charlotte, about all the lives that had been changed by one man's refusal to accept cruelty as inevitable, and she made a promise to that 5-year-old girl, to every child who'd ever been told they didn't belong, to every person who'd been dismissed as worthless, that she would spend the rest of her life proving that human worth isn't determined by wealth or status or circumstance, that compassion isn't weakness, that privilege without purpose is poverty, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the world corrects itself through people brave enough to defend the defenseless. Maya Wright. She'd taken Thomas's last name when he'd legally adopted her at 18, a gesture that had meant more than any trust fund, stood and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood she was now serving. Tomorrow, children would flood through these doors. Children like she'd been. Children who needed to be seen, to be valued, to be given permission to dream beyond survival. And she would be there, every day. Not because she had to, but because she understood something that most people with privilege never learn, that the greatest gift you can give isn't money or opportunity or even compassion. It's the unwavering belief that every human being, regardless of circumstance, deserves dignity, deserves to take up space, deserves to be defended when the world tries to erase them. That's what Thomas had given her in that ballroom 10 years ago. Not toys, not money, but the radical, transformative belief that she mattered, that her humanity was non-negotiable, that she deserved to be protected. And now she would spend the rest of her life giving that same gift to others, because that's what love does. It multiplies, it compounds, it ripples forward through time, touching lives you'll never meet, changing futures you'll never see, proving that one moment of courage can echo through generations. The birthday party that destroyed James's social life and humiliated a 5-year-old girl had become the origin story for a movement, not a movement with press releases and hashtags, but a quiet revolution of people choosing compassion over comfort, justice over convenience, humanity over hierarchy. And in the end, that's the only kind of revolution that ever really matters. The kind that changes hearts, not just systems. The kind that transforms individuals, not just institutions. The kind that proves, one choice at a time, that the world doesn't have to be the way it is. That cruelty isn't inevitable. That privilege can be used for good. That every single human being, regardless of circumstance, carries within them infinite worth. Maya smiled, touching the window glass, feeling the cool surface against her palm, and whispered to her reflection, to the 5-year-old girl she'd been, to every child who would walk through these doors tomorrow. You matter. You've always mattered, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that compassion is the most powerful force for change, if it made you question how you treat people, society tells you don't matter, please leave a comment sharing which moment resonated most deeply with you. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that challenge us to be better, to see more clearly, to love more bravely. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that one person's courage can change countless lives. Because in the end, we're all just trying to matter. We're all just trying to be seen. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give is simply refusing to look away when the world tells us someone isn't worth defending. End.